You never really expect the cops to show up when you're just sitting by a lake you own. No bonfire raging out of control. No rowdy party with music blasting till dawn. Not even a single fishing line in the water. Just me, a fold-out camping chair, and a thermos of coffee, staring at the sunrise over the ranch lake I legally paid for. But apparently in the strange, parallel universe run by my HOA, that was considered a crime. The crackle of gravel tires announced their arrival before. I even saw the red and blue flashers bouncing off the trees. 2 officers stepped out, confused looks on their faces, hands hovering by their belts. Behind them, my ever-so-charming HOA president, lips pursed, arms crossed, the embodiment of smug authority. "Sir, we received a complaint about a trespasser camping on private property," one officer said. I just stared at him, then at the lake, then back again. Private property? That was rich. Because here's the kicker they didn't expect. That lake wasn't theirs. It wasn't the HOA's, it wasn't even public. It was mine, bought and deeded clear as day. And yet they'd been treating it like their personal backyard. Playground for years, sneaking their boats in, holding barbecues, even charging residents lake access fees. So when they tried to paint me as the trespasser on my own land, I realized something important. They'd just handed me the perfect chance to flip the entire game. The lake had always been my dream, a slice of quiet carved out of chaos. When I closed on the ranch, I imagined weekends of fishing, evenings of campfires, mornings of still water reflecting the sky like glass. What I didn't imagine was the homeowners association treating my land like some kind of community water park. At first I thought it was a misunderstanding. The week I moved in, I spotted kids splashing in the shallows, parents grilling hot dogs even, a jet ski carving across the lake's surface. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, until I noticed the sign, HOA residents only, lake access pass required. A laminated piece of plastic zip-tied to a wooden post, planted squarely on my shoreline. I pulled out my deed that night just to double-check. Every acre, every inch of the lakefront mine. No easements, no shared access, no fine print. So the next morning I asked the HOA president, let's call her Karen because of course, "Hey, I think there's been a mistake. That sign on my lake?" She gave me the kind of smile you reserve for toddlers who don't understand how crayons work. "Oh, no mistake," she said. "This lake has always been part of the community amenities. Residents pay dues for access. You'll need to register if you want to use it." I held up the deed like a courtroom exhibit. "This says otherwise." Her smile flickered, but only for a second. "Deeds can be confusing. Don't worry, the HOA board will handle it." That was my first warning. Because a week later, I found a letter taped to my front door. HOA stationery, bold lettering. Unauthorized camping on community property. Fine, $250. Camping on my own lake. I thought it was a joke until I realized she wasn't bluffing. Neighbors started giving me sidelong looks, whispering as they walked past. Some avoided eye contact entirely. A few, those who had clearly been enjoying their lake, looked almost panicked that I was rocking the boat. And the whispers turned into rules. Suddenly, I was getting notices about my fence being 2 inches too high, my truck blocking sightlines, even the color of my mailbox not meeting community standards. It felt like a squeeze, a pressure campaign. And then came the night I caught 2 board members dragging kayaks out of the water at midnight, their headlights bouncing across the waves. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a lake. It was about control, and Karen wasn't going to let go without a fight. That was just the beginning. If Section 2 felt like pressure, Section 3 was when the whole dam broke. The first wave was the fines. They didn't just stop at camping. Suddenly, every week, a new violation notice appeared in my mailbox like clockwork. Grass length exceeds HOA standard. Never mind the fact I had just mowed it. Unapproved structure on property. That structure was my tool shed, built by the previous owner, approved years ago. Excessive noise complaint. The supposed noise? Me hammering a single nail while repairing a fence at 3 p.m. on a Saturday. The fines piled up, $50 here, $100 there, $300 for repeated noncompliance. I started keeping them in a folder, partly out of spite, partly because something told me these little slips of paper were going to come in handy later. But fines were just the surface. Then came the sabotage. One morning, I walked down to the lake to find my dock ropes slashed clean through. My canoe, once tied up neatly, was floating halfway across the water like some lost toy. Another evening, my mailbox had been yanked off its post and tossed into the ditch. No witnesses, of course. When I called the sheriff's department, they shrugged. Could be kids messing around. Sure, kids with bolt cutters and a vendetta. The cherry on top? Karen herself showing up at my gate with 2 board members in tow, clipboards in hand. Like a self-appointed firing squad. "We've had multiple complaints about your behavior," she said, dragging out the last word. As if I'd been hosting underground raves. I leaned on the gate, calm as I could manage. "My behavior? You mean existing on my own property?" Her eyes narrowed. Your property, she echoed. That's funny, because this lake has been under HOA care for decades. We maintain it. We clean it. We regulate it. You think you can just waltz in and claim it because of a few pieces of paper? A few pieces of paper being the legal deed signed by the county. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I just said yes. That's exactly how it works. Her jaw tightened so hard I thought she might crack a molar. That week I noticed something new. Neighbors starting to distance themselves. Not all of them. A few quietly admitted they'd always thought the HOA was overreaching, but most were too scared. After all, Karen had a reputation. She controlled who got fined, who got harassed, who got exceptions. Want a shed built? Better be on her good side. Want to repaint your house without a 6-month approval process? Better not cross her. And if you did, suddenly you'd find yourself buried in citations just like me. But the most outrageous move came on a Saturday morning when I woke up to the sound of motors. I stepped outside and saw 2 jet skis tearing across the lake, followed by a pontoon boat full of people blasting music. Kids were jumping off laughing, splashing while coolers cracked open on deck. A whole party, on my lake. I walked down to the shore, arms crossed, waiting. Karen waved from the boat like she was greeting a guest of honor. Beautiful day, isn't it? Sure is, I said. Enjoy trespassing while it lasts. That got her attention. The smile vanished. She motioned for the boat to cut. Its engine glided closer and hissed just loud enough for me to hear over the water. You'll regret this. Nobody takes this lake from me. From her. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't about community. It wasn't about rules. It was about ownership and the illusion of power. The next week, the harassment escalated into threats. Anonymous notes in my mailbox. You don't belong here. Spray paint on my fence. HOA rules apply. Even a voicemail from a blocked number muttering, pack up and leave before things get ugly. I won't lie. There were nights. I sat on my porch staring into the dark tree line, wondering just how far they'd go. But here's the thing about people like Karen. They're so used to bullying, they forget some of us know how to fight back. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, pictures, even the sheriff's half-hearted responses. I set up trail cameras by the dock. Caught blurry, but telling shots of board members sneaking around after dark. I saved every fine, every letter, every note. And with each new piece of evidence, my anger stopped feeling like a burden. It started feeling like a weapon. Because sooner or later, this little HOA empire was going to crumble. And I was going to be the one to swing the hammer. The funny thing about being underestimated is that it gives you time to prepare. Karen thought I was just another homeowner. She could bury under paperwork, fines, and intimidation until I gave up. What she didn't realize was that every letter, every threat, every midnight trespass was adding fuel to my fire. So I started building my counterattack. Step 1 was airtight evidence. I went from 1 trail camera to 6, hidden in trees along the shoreline on the dock, even tucked under the eaves of my shed. Within days, I had hours of footage. Board members launching kayaks, teenagers lugging coolers down to the lake, even Karen herself unlocking a chain on my dock like she owned it. The best part? I caught her collecting cash. 2 residents handing over bills in exchange for what looked suspiciously like lake passes. HOA fees rerouted straight into her pocket. Step 2 was paperwork, the kind she couldn't wave off with a smirk. I dug up my deed plat map surveys, even the county records showing the lake had never once been part of the HOA's charter. Then I called a friend of mine who happened to be a real estate attorney. He took one look at the stack and said, this isn't just overreach. This is fraud. Step 3 was patience. Because while I was stockpiling proof, Karen was getting sloppy. The more I ignored her fines, the angrier she got. The fines ballooned into threats of foreclosure. Laughable considering none of them had a legal leg to stand on. Neighbors whispered that she was cracking down on me, but what they didn't know was that I was quietly setting the stage. And then the opportunity practically delivered itself. The HOA sent out flyers for their annual summer lake festival, complete with fireworks, food trucks, and you guessed it, boat rentals, on my property. That was my opening. I called the sheriff's department. This time I didn't just complain about trespassing. I presented them with photos, videos, notarized documents, proof that the HOA had been charging residents for access to land and water they had no rights to. The deputy's eyebrows shot up. This is serious. But I wasn't done. On the morning of the festival, before a single canopy tent went up, I posted brand new signs around the lake. Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I locked the dock with a heavy chain, parked my truck across the access path, made sure every camera was recording. By noon, families were showing up with coolers and lawn chairs, only to find Karen, red-faced, arguing with me at the shoreline. This is harassment, she barked, waving her clipboard like it was a badge. No, I said calmly. This is property law. And today the law's on my side. Right on cue, 2 sheriff's cruisers Pulled up lights flashing. Deputies stepped out, clipboards in hand, not HOA clipboards. Real ones. Neighbors started gathering, murmuring, phones raised to record. You could feel the balance shift in the air. Karen went pale when the deputies announced they were opening a formal investigation into the HOA's lake fees and unauthorized use of private property. For the first time since this whole circus started, she didn't have a comeback. Just silence. And let me tell you, silence can be the sweetest sound in the world. That was the day the fear flipped. The neighbors who had been avoiding me, they started inching closer, curious, some even whispering, "Good for you." The ones who had paid for their so-called lake passes, they looked furious, but not at me. The cracks in Karen's power weren't just showing. They were splitting wide open, and I was just getting started. If Section 4 was the setup, Section 5 was the hammer dropping. The investigation didn't take long. Once the sheriff's department saw the footage of cash exchanges, midnight trespassing, and the fake lake passes, they looped in the county prosecutor. Suddenly, what Karen had brushed off as community rules was being called what it really was: fraud and criminal trespass. But the true justice came in layers. The first layer hit at the HOA board. Meeting held 2 weeks after the lake festival debacle. Normally these meetings were Karen's stage, neighbors cowed into silence while she rattled off fines and approvals. This time, the room was packed, buzzing with deputies standing in the back. I walked in carrying my folder thick with evidence. When the floor opened, I stood, calm, slow, letting the silence stretch. Then I laid it all out. Photos of board members sneaking boats in at night. Video of Karen pocketing cash. Certified county maps proving the HOA had no claim to the lake. And finally, the stack of bogus fines, over $1,000 worth, that they'd tried to stick me with. The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, angry shouts. A man in the back demanded to know how much he'd been scammed for lake access. A woman slammed her fist on the table, shouting, "You've been stealing from us!" Karen tried to gavel the room into silence, but her hands were trembling. Her voice cracked. And then the deputies stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you regarding ongoing investigations into HOA financial misconduct." The room went dead quiet. Karen's face drained of color. She stammered, protested, even tried to shift blame onto her board members. But it was too late. They were all being questioned, their little empire unraveling in real time. The second layer of justice came from the neighbors themselves. For years, Karen had ruled with fear. But once the curtain was pulled back, that fear flipped to fury. Within a month, a special vote was called. The entire board was ousted, replaced with members who wanted transparency and sanity. And the lake? Officially recognized once and for all as private property. My property. No more lake passes. No more trespassing parties. The final layer, though, the one that tasted the sweetest, was Karen herself. Word spread fast, not just through the neighborhood but through town. The HOA queen, who had fined people for mailbox colors, was suddenly the butt of every joke. I heard one guy at the hardware store chuckle, "Careful or Karen'll charge you for standing in the parking lot." And me? I couldn't resist a little poetic justice. One evening I set up my camping chair on the dock, poured myself a coffee, and snapped a photo of the sunset reflecting off the water. I posted it online with a simple caption: "Enjoying my lake. No pass required." It went viral in the neighborhood group chat. Even her former allies shared it with laughing emojis. That was the final nail. Karen went quiet. No more letters. No more clipboards. She stopped showing her face entirely. Because in the end, the one thing bullies hate most is exposure. And once the light hit her little kingdom, it crumbled to dust. It's funny how quickly things can flip. 1 month I was the guy being fined for camping on his own property. The next, I was the guy who exposed the HOA's dirty little secret and reclaimed what was rightfully his. Looking back, I realized it was never just about the lake. It was about control, about people who thrive on intimidation, hoping no one ever pushes back hard, enough to call their bluff. And here's the thing, bullies don't disappear. When you move into a nicer neighborhood, sometimes they just put on polo shirts and call themselves board members. But the lesson? Paper trails beat power trips. Every fine, I saved every photo. I snapped every late-night note I jotted down. It all added up to the one thing people like. Karen can't fight truth. Now when I sit by the lake, it feels different. Not just peaceful but earned. A reminder that sometimes the quietest victories come after the loudest battles. And sure, a small part of me still smirks at the thought of Karen scrolling through social media, seeing that picture of me on the dock with the caption, "My lake. No pass required." So here's my takeaway for you. Never let someone convince you that your rights, your property, or your peace of mind are theirs to control. Document, stand your ground, and when the time comes, swing the hammer. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, would you have fought back or just packed up and left? And if you made it this far, comment. Justice served down below, so I know my fellow fighters are out there. Because sometimes the best kind of revenge isn't revenge at all. It's justice.